Hello and welcome to Ultiworld's Stanford Invite Saturday post-game show. I'm Charlie Eisenhood, joined by Keith Rayner. So glad to have you with us. We're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on here at the fields today. We are here in Fremont, California. We just wrapped up our pre-quarter streaming round. We watched Oregon really dominate against Ohio State in this final round. Final score 13-4. Honestly, you say this sometimes, it wasn't even that close. I mean, Oregon dominated from start to finish. They were never broken. They only had one offensive line turnover. But there's a whole lot more to see from today. Of course, we only showed you 4 total games, and there were dozens played across the complex here in the city of Fremont. So, Keith, as we watch the sun set here on the tournament, and a couple games still just wrapping up, and we'll get you caught up with all of the results from the pre-quarters in just a second. What's your assessment of the day so far?
Well, I mean, if you look at the two divisions, I mean, certainly in the women's division, all the top seeds in the pools advanced into the quarterfinals, and it was almost true in the men's division. Wisconsin upsets over Oregon to win their pool, but otherwise, the teams that we expected to be really strong were, and even that Oregon team only lost one game to a Wisconsin team that also lost. They won in a tiebreaker situation. So I think that while there were plenty of upsets and some surprises, I think the teams that we expected to look really strong did so.
Agreed. And I think it sets us up tomorrow for a really good competition. Just to take you through what happened today in the men's division, Pittsburgh, Colorado, Wisconsin, and Carleton are your pool winners, with Pittsburgh, Colorado, and Carleton going undefeated. So they all get a bye into the quarterfinals tomorrow. And then we will get to pre-quarters results in just a moment. On the women's side, it was Stanford, UCLA, Texas, and Dartmouth all going undefeated. Those are the top seeds in each of those pools, and they go 3-0, and they are headed to quarters. I expect to see those 4 teams in the semis tomorrow.
I certainly think that's a possibility. There are a couple of teams that we think could challenge in really each division in those semifinals, but quarterfinals, We've certainly seen surprises along the way. Charlie, you want me to go through the quarterfinals matchups that we're going to probably
absolutely.
see? And some stuff I think is still wrapping up here. But let's see. We have Oregon defeating Tufts in the quarterfinals in the men's division, where we're going to start. So they'll advance to play Carleton tomorrow. Oregon, Carleton in one of these quarterfinals. UBC crushing UConn in their pre-quarterfinal. So UBC is going to advance to play Colorado tomorrow in the quarterfinal round. At last count, with Hardcap having gone off, Virginia Tech is going to fall to Stanford, probably around the tune of 12-7, 12-10, something of that nature. And Stanford's going to advance to play against Pittsburgh in their quarterfinal. And I believe Georgia was able to take care of business against Texas, who's without their star player, Dylan Larberg. So Georgia's going to get a chance to play Wisconsin in the quarterfinal. That sounds like it's
going to be a good
pretty
one.
Explosive one.
So there you go. And we look ahead to some really exciting matchups. And, when you look ahead to tomorrow, which games are you most excited to see? I mean, and you can think about hypothetical matchups. I mean, for me, we've already talked a little bit about it on the broadcast today. Stanford versus Dartmouth in the semifinals in the women's division. To me, an extremely compelling matchup. A game that I think everybody wants to see.
There are great matchups all along the bracket, even in the quarterfinals round. I mean, tell me you're not salivating for Georgia, Wisconsin. There's a lot of big plays that could come up in that game. But I think for me, I would love to see Pittsburgh go toe-to-toe with either Colorado or Oregon. If we get all the way to the finals and we get that 1-2 final in the men's division, Pittsburgh and Colorado, I think that could be a really close, exciting game. But Pittsburgh's D-line versus that Oregon O-line, that could be bring a lot of fireworks to the table. And then in the women's division, like you said, how can you not want to see Stanford and Dartmouth? Finally, we get the Jacqueline Verzu, Courtney Gegg matchup, which, I mean, that's a dream
they're as
matchup.
Excited to play it as we are to watch it. And I think that's pretty cool.
A lot.
That's
that
true.
Says a lot. We didn't go over the women's division quarterfinals yet, and I believe there's one game that's still up in the air in that division, which is Colorado and UBC. Let me see if I can get us a final count. Hardcap Asgill is not on, apparently, according to the last tweet for them.
They may have started late. A lot
Right.
of those pre-quarters games, teams had to move pretty far to get to their field.
Colorado up 11-10 on UBC in a very close matchup. But in the other games, Cal beats UC Davis. They're going to advance to play Dartmouth in the quarterfinals. Oregon, we saw dismantling Ohio State. They're going to take on Stanford in the quarterfinals. And Michigan beating Colorado College. So they beat them 13-8, and they will advance to play Texas in the quarterfinals as well. So if you had to look at these teams in the quarterfinals, Charlie, the teams that didn't advance, that had to play through the pre-quarters, in both divisions, who do you think is the most likely to score the upset? You have Oregon, on the women's side, Oregon, California, Michigan, and Colorado. And then on the men's side, you have Stanford, Oregon, Georgia, and UBC, who's been really hot.
Yeah, they have been hot, but unfortunately for UBC, they're coming up against Colorado, and I think that's where their luck runs out. For me, I think the team that's most likely on the men's side to get a big upset tomorrow is Georgia. They only took one loss today. They lost to Carleton, and they lost fairly soundly, but they had that game where Parker Bray just didn't bring it. And that, unfortunately for them, happens from time to time. And, against a Carleton team that has extremely good depth, I think Georgia's susceptible because they don't have that. They rely a lot on Parker Bray. They rely a lot on Nathan Haskell. I think I was talking to the Carleton coach, Nick Stewart, and he mentioned to me that Parker Bray played literally every point of their matchup and that they were looking a little bit tired, which is certainly understandable. But I think that Georgia has the pieces to potentially beat that Wisconsin team. Their defense is good enough, and I think that I'm not sure that Wisconsin has the individual defenders to stop Bray and Haskell, and that's going to be the big question mark. They lost a couple of their really good one-on-one defenders. They played great team defense. We saw that today against Oregon. But I think that's a really compelling matchup. I think, for me, I put that at about a pick-em. I think that could go either way.
Let's see.
And then on the women's side, you got to give me the teams again. It was Oregon, and
you have Oregon versus Stanford, Dartmouth versus Cal, Texas versus Michigan, and UCLA versus Colorado. And the teams you're looking at are Colorado, Michigan, Cal, and Oregon.
By matchup, I think Colorado's got the best shot. I think that Colorado has shown that they have the talent to beat good teams. I think at times they don't play to their potential. But I think, I really like the way Cal has been playing. Unfortunately, they're playing Dartmouth tomorrow, and having seen Dartmouth today, I don't really see anybody other than Stanford beating them. I think those look like the two best teams in the tournament right now. And so, but I think Colorado will definitely have a shot in that game.
I got to agree with you on the Colorado call. I think they're a very strong team. Right now, just from watching, when I get to watch them play, to me they look like a top 5 team. Like, they look like a team that can contend for semifinals. Now, that said, UCLA has been very impressive. And I agree with you about Cal. I think that Cal has been really hot, but running into Dartmouth is just not the team you want to see right now. So I'm also going to stick with Colorado on the women's side, but put that asterisk next to Cal. Now that's assuming that Colorado wins their game because they're at 11s right now with UBC. Would you say the same about UBC going up against UCLA?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think either of those teams has a really good chance of getting an upset win there against UCLA. UCLA, the offense has just been really sharp, and Katie Reynolds, our women's division reporter who's sitting just to our left, is shaking her head no that either of those teams has a chance to upset UCLA. So we'll see. I think of those games, like I said already, I think in the women's division we're going to see those top 4 seeds advance to semis, but I think that game is the most likely to be an upset.
Now on the men's side for me, I like Georgia, but I like the ability of Parker Bray and Nathan Haskell, not his brother Tyler, for them to take over games. And I just don't see it, though, against Wisconsin. I do think Wisconsin has shown that they are not consistent, but I don't know that they have the defenders necessary to deal with Wisconsin. For me, I actually think Stanford's the team that I think is most likely to get an upset. Mm-hmm. I want to see Pitt. I want to see if Pitt can play with consistency. I think the ceiling's really high, but I think that Stanford has some really talented players who can compete with the top-end players on Pitt. And I'll be interested to see how Pitt can match up with some of the deep attack that Stanford has. So I would like Stanford as my upset team. And I know it will be a shocker for Stanford to take down Pitt, but right now they would be the team that I would take in the men's division.
I'll tell you what, I would be shocked. I having seen Pitt at warm-up, they're just way better than Stanford. I think, is it possible for Pitt to play poorly in that game and lose? Yes. I think Pitt has shown a tendency, even today, to be a little inconsistent with their performance. And they were in a very tight game with Cal Poly and had to pull away late. Stanford could totally have a shot at getting that upset. By the way, if you have questions for us, hit us in the live chat here on YouTube, and we will try to get to them in just a second. That said, I think Pittsburgh is probably 3 or 4 points better than Stanford. I would be surprised if Stanford were to get the upset. All right, well, let's take some reader questions. First question here, what happened in the Northwest region today? Well, that's a good question.
Well, they got rocked.
We were talking about this off the air. The Northwest women's team, they're looking at maybe only getting 2 bids this year right now.
Crazy. Do you remember when the North Central went from 5 bids to 1 bids? Like, Northwest is saying, hey, we can do this. We can challenge that.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but when you see this Whitman team that we had at number 2 in the preseason, and for good reason, they were a great team last year. They go to the national final, and then here they show up and into this season with basically the same players, and yet they've been really not very good.
And imagine...
I don't know how to explain that.
It's unbelievable, to be honest. And but imagine a scenario where they have 2 bids, and then you could see Whitman beat Oregon
easily
and keep Oregon from going to nationals.
100%.
Or UBC, that's wild.
If they only get 2 bids, I mean, I don't like to go to cliches, but anything is possible in the Northwest region with only 2 bids.
Well, look, Charlie, don't save all of the shaming of the Northwest for just the women's division.
That is true.
Because in the men's division, Washington goes 0-3 today, and
rough.
Oregon State, they get a win. So I think that they probably were the most successful.
And remember, they qualified by winning the Open. So this is a team that's not even really supposed to be here. For them to get a win at all, I think, is good.
I think the men's division certainly had more success, especially because we saw such a good day for UBC. But I feel like they had a pretty favorable pool with the way that they performed. But Hugh Knapp and that UBC team are pretty dangerous right now. Oregon, though, doesn't hold seed, and you see what happened to Washington. I don't know that there's something that happened to them. It just seems like there is not a level of consistency from teams from the Northwest region right now, and I think it's a confluence of events that it's happening to so many teams at once rather than a trend that's being caused by some isolated cause in the Northwest.
Yeah, I think there's no question that at this point in the season, you have to look at Oregon and Washington, the men's side, as being disappointing relative to expectations. Oregon was the number 1 team coming into Pres Day a couple weeks ago. And yeah, they took the weird loss. You could count that out, but they got exposed today against Wisconsin, I thought.
Let me hit you with some breaking Northwest news.
They are not
Charlie.
A semifinals team right now.
Hit you with some breaking Northwest news.
I want breaking news.
Oh, UBC advances to the quarterfinals, upsets Colorado in the women's division 12-11. UBC gets their big win,
That's
and Colorado does exactly what you feared they would do, which is not live up to the potential of their skill. It's tough to have to play a team like UBC in the pre-quarterfinals. They have to be one of the most dangerous teams here from a talent standpoint. But we saw them get just completely obliterated by Dartmouth. It's...
Well, but I think we have to go back and remember kind of the framework that we were looking at this season in the women's division earlier this year, which was we had 3 teams at the top that were just way better than the rest of the division. And I think we take Whitman out of there at this point. You cannot put them there. Maybe they get there by the end of the year, but right now they're not there. But Dartmouth and Stanford, I will not be surprised if they romp everybody they play tomorrow. And, of course, they're going to probably face each other, which will be a great game.
What would be your line on a Dartmouth-Stanford game? Revisiting this conversation.
Stanford by
2.5.
2.5 is what I was going to say. Yeah. So you can place your bets right now if that matchup happens. Stanford minus 2.5. Okay, let's get to some other questions here. Biggest upsets. I think the biggest upset for me that just stands out in my head is Auburn beating Wisconsin 13-10 in the men's division. I really have no idea how that happened. Of course, I did not watch the game. But
biggest upset has to be UConn over Washington.
We
thought
that's
UConn
actually
was going to get
point.
blown out in every game. And Washington is a top 15 team, right? They're hovering around that range.
UConn isn't really even close to top 25 right now.
And for that was a shocker to me. I couldn't believe that when I heard it. But
they turned around and got crushed by UBC in pre-quarters.
There were plenty of upsets to go around.
There were.
I mean, Colorado College, the only unranked team in the women's division, beats USC to make it into the bracket after USC put up like really good games against Dartmouth and UBC. So certainly some surprises in the division. Davis beats Western Washington. You get Oregon State notching their win too. So even the Texas team beating Cal Poly Slow, a Texas team without Dylan Larberg.
Yeah.
There's certainly been some injuries that impacted these teams.
Yeah, Nate Pettyjohn was out for Cal Poly.
And Washington, I said this on the podcast where we were talking about Washington, but I don't know what they need to do because I feel like they're constantly dealing with injuries. That's a team that struggles
that's a good
with
point.
that. But
all right, a few other things here. Regions that help themselves or hurt themselves when it comes to nationals bids. Well, we already talked about the Northwest not really doing themselves any favors. Trying to think about regions that really obviously help themselves. Well, I think you'll have to look at the Southwest women's. They've been pretty much holding their own. USC had a little bit of a bumpy day, but Cal looked really good. Obviously, Stanford has been dominant. UCLA looked really good. And so they certainly didn't hurt themselves. I think they're kind of holding steady. And right now, they're sitting with 5 bids. That's a lot. On the men's side, I'm not sure that any regions really stand out to me. South Central's doing fine. I think Texas getting that win over Cal Poly is a big deal.
Yeah,
you think about that marginal bid. Could Cal Poly end up dropping out and ending up giving the Southwest only one bid?
This was a conversation we had last night about Texas once they lost Dylan Larberg. Are they going to be able to preserve the 3-bid South Central and keep that triumvirate of Texas A&M, Texas, and Colorado all in a position to go to nationals if they can get past Colorado State and company in the South Central? If Texas can't hold that bid and suddenly it's a 2-bid region, South Central Regionals gets pretty exciting, and it feels like
Absolutely.
Texas is, especially if they don't get Larberg back, in the toughest spot there. So a big win for them to kind of keep afloat in there. I actually think the men's Northwest did themselves some favor, did themselves pretty well, because we think that Washington and Oregon are probably pretty secure to earn bids. Washington maybe that's going to fluctuate for them today, but those teams at the margins are you have to look at, and UBC and Oregon State both getting quality wins today, and that's going to help them with potentially getting the Northwest an additional bid.
Right. Okay, another question. Players that were not invited to U24 tryouts that proved they deserved a spot after today.
Is that what that question means? It's players out of the U23. Is it saying that people invited, like players out of the group invited, or players who were not invited? Unclear, but
well, we could answer it either way, I suppose. But I'm trying to think about there have been some players that were notable snubs. We talked a little bit about this on a podcast a couple weeks ago. Not at this tournament, but Nathan Kwan for UNC didn't get an invite, and I think they already are probably going, we made a mistake on that one. Nathan Kwan is one of the best defenders on UNC, if not their best defender.
He keeps having these series of layout blocks in their highlight reel that have gotten their own nickname, the Quantage. What an amazing nickname. But when you're good enough to spawn your own series of highlights...
If you get a meme... You are good to go.
Good.
You need to give that person a tryout. I'm trying to think of who else at this tournament. I was talking to Cody Mills earlier today, and he was mentioning Nolan Walsh from Stanford, and nobody on Stanford got a tryout.
Elliot Chartok did.
Oh, Elliot Chartok did. I'm sorry.
He looked freaking good.
Yeah,
so.
and clearly he deserves one. But Nolan Walsh didn't, and he has been an extremely effective player. And you're thinking about how many players, they're going to invite maybe 10 more players in each division. It's very difficult to know which players tried out and didn't, or applied and didn't, I should say. And so that makes it difficult. But I think you may see coaches even directly reaching out to players and saying, hey, we noticed you didn't apply, but we sure would like you to apply because we think you have the talent to
I expect that's
add
what
to
they'll
our
use
tryout.
A number of the 10 flex slots that we've heard about to do is encourage players who maybe didn't apply to see if they would like to join in. I expect that we'll see some of that. It's really is tough to comment on this stuff just because like we said, we don't know who has applied and who didn't, who maybe has commitments over that time period that prevent them from wanting to play. So that's a little difficult to make those judgments. But
here's a good question, and I think this is an interesting one too. Player of the Year candidates that rose up or underperformed today. And I kind of throw that out to a lot of the Ultimate World reporters who are now sitting around us. If you have ideas on who, Katie Reynolds writes in all caps, Han Chen from UCLA, who was really an impressive player last year, but has risen to another level and maybe the most impressive individual player in the women's division at this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, she was a runner-up for Player of the Year last year, but right now, I mean, if you had to award it today, you'd give it to her, right? I mean, she's been a monster and the entire offensive driver for them. But
yeah, now you think about how would that team look on offense without her?
I mean,
it would be bad. It's Russell Westbrook level
off
status.
Air, I compared her to Brody Smith, college Brody Smith. I mean, what makes them so hard to guard is that they're big and athletic, but they are powerful. And you see her just throw some throws, not just hucks, but inside breaks with just such precision and power that it's hard for the defense to deal with that. You can't practice that. You can't practice playing against someone with that kind of cannon. And her ability her throwing talents have just really expanded. And right now she's probably the biggest difference maker in the women's division.
I think you also look at Jacqueline Verjou as somebody who really played well. Had some throwing mistakes. We talked about that on the broadcast today, but just physically so gifted on another level from everyone else we've seen. I thought she really played the best of anybody on Dartmouth today and looks like sort of their MVP. I know you can look at Angela Zhu and others on that team as really important players, and that's for sure. I think anybody in the country wants Angela Zhu to be their center handler, but I thought Jacqueline Verjou sort of stood out as being the most effective player on Dartmouth.
I think that in the history of Ultimate writing, especially when you expand that to like RSD and Reddit, the word unstoppable has been blatantly overused. Jacqueline Verjou is actually unstoppable.
And that's why I'm so excited to watch that Stanford game tomorrow and that if they play each other in the semifinals and see what can Courtney Gegg do against
Courtney
her.
Gegg is got to be in your player of the year conversation also.
Victoria McCann took that matchup for most of today and had a horrible, horrible game. And, I don't know that a lot of that was directly due to Jacqueline Verjou, but it couldn't have helped.
There were points during that game where three players were guarding Verjou at once because she just was so threatening deep. Some other coming from our reporters, we have a couple other suggestions from the men's division.
Great.
Parker Bray.
Yes.
I mean, his stock has been climbing rapidly. He's a shooter.
Saying it. Imagine if that Georgia team from last year hadn't had him injured at nationals. I was at Southeast Regionals last year. I watched him shred and crush everybody in that pretty good Southeast region last year, and I was thinking, this Georgia team, sleeper semis team, but then he got hurt. But, now, even though they've lost a couple players, they are still a very relevant team thanks to his play.
Mark Rawls from Colorado, another player being brought up by the reporting team here. Rawls is a little, unsuspecting, but he just gets the job done. He's just a guy who goes out there and he has all the tools. He knows his strengths, knows his weaknesses, is springy so he can play a little bit bigger than he actually is. But he's been very impressive in the men's division, and I think it's one of the reasons that, to me, Colorado has played themselves in a position to be considered a contender. I mean, that's pending. I really think we need to see what they do tomorrow. But to me, they look like they've got the goods.
Yep. All right, one more question here, and then I think we're about to wrap up and pack up. Any team here that didn't make quarters that could make finals at nationals? All right, can we just get the list of teams that is? I think that's what I need first.
So let's start in the women's division because that's what's on my screen.
All right.
Teams that didn't make quarters. Colorado, Whitman, Ohio State, Washington, Davis, Western Washington, Colorado College, and USC.
Georgia. All right, let's start there.
Yeah.
There's only one right answer, and it's Whitman.
Yeah.
And I really don't think that they actually have a chance to make the finals again this year, the way that they're playing. But they made the finals last year, we know they have the
They
parts,
return almost
the pieces.
everything
That's
from
what's,
that team.
It's a crazy thing right now. But I
So
think
you
that's
can't
the
write 'em
only
off.
possible answer. I would never put money on any of those other teams to do so.
To me, the next closest is Colorado. I like the makeup
but
still.
come on. Colorado's not making the finals.
Men's division teams that missed out. Texas, Cal Poly, Tufts, Oregon State, Virginia Tech, Auburn, Connecticut, and Washington.
No chance. I mean, I'm sorry.
None of those teams.
I don't buy a single one of those teams. I think, maybe some people are going to try to say Washington, but when have they proven to win big games? Ever.
I could not take Washington over SLO. I think SLO is the better team right now, but I don't. SLO is not a finalist.
No.
Although, you know what?
But part of this is
Harvard wasn't a finalist either. But look at what
that's a
happened.
good point. Part of this is that the women's division is a little bit deeper here. As you get to the bottom of the men's division, you have some teams that aren't even in the top 25 right now. So, I don't think it's bad to say that none of those teams are going to make finals, because I don't think really any of those teams have a chance. You really have to be in the bracket and looking good at this point in the season if you're going to be considered a legitimate challenger. And remember, Harvard last year, although we didn't expect them to go to the finals, of course, they did play well at this tournament. They beat Oregon. I think did they go to semis at this tournament?
Yes,
and then they lost to Wisconsin. They lost to Wisconsin. And, that Wisconsin team was really good. In fact, Wisconsin was the best
really well.
team at Nationals for most of last year, and then they got the rain game, and they were horrible in the rain all year. They got crushed by Carleton in the rain at regionals, and then they lost again in the rain. I think Pittsburgh beat them in the morning at Nationals. I don't remember now.
That Harvard team was really like a two-man show. Wisconsin's drawn the same type of matchup they did last year. This time in quarterfinals, they get the East Coast team that's a two-man show.
That's right.
We'll see what they can do. I don't know if Parker Bray and Nathan Haskell are John Stubbs and Mark Vandenberg.
Not quite. But I think we got to give Parker Bray some credit.
They're the closest pair right now in the division.
Parker Bray has been excellent. Okay, last thing, we got to make our picks. Picks for tomorrow. Who makes? Well, let's just pick finalists, and I guess we can pick them all. We can pick semis and then finals and then winner.
All right, so men's division. You've got Pitt, Stanford, and Pitt, Stanford, Carleton, Oregon, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Colorado.
All right, let's pick them one by one. I take Pitt.
Wait, hold on. We're getting an update here. We're
got to check our brackets.
Yeah, we got to check. The brackets are not live updated on Score Reporter, so we're pulling everything from. I'm pretty sure it's Carleton, Stanford. We're just clarifying to make sure.
So Tufts upset Oregon. Is that right?
No, it's Carleton, Oregon.
It is Oregon.
Yeah, Hardcap came on. Okay, cool. So clarified. Stanford does beat Tufts.
Pitt, first game, Pitt, Stanford. I take Pitt.
I also take Pitt.
Okay, next game.
Carleton, Oregon.
Carleton, Oregon. I take Carleton.
I'm also going to take Carleton.
All right. Wisconsin and Georgia. I'm going to take Georgia.
All right, I'm taking Wisconsin there.
Colorado, UBC. I'm going to take Colorado for sure.
I'm going to take Colorado, but I think UBC's been on fire. They have been
on fire.
Be right on Colorado.
I haven't really had a chance to watch them yet. So, okay, so that gives us the semifinals of Pittsburgh and Carleton, and then we pick different ones in the bottom. So for Pittsburgh and Carleton, I'm going to take Carleton.
Interesting. You've been the big pick guy.
But I've also been the big Carleton guy. Remember, I picked Carleton to win warm-up, and they vastly disappointed me. But they look like a great team this weekend.
Interesting. I'm going to take Pitt here.
Okay.
What
be a good one.
What you've got? Colorado, Georgia.
I got Colorado, Georgia, and I'm going to take Colorado.
I'm also going to take Colorado.
Okay. And finals, I have Colorado Carleton. That's a great game. Wow. I have not seen enough of Colorado to have a good feel. But you know what? I'm going to go with Carleton. We're taking them to win the tournament.
All right, I'm taking Colorado. They were the team I thought was going to win this tournament when we started, and I think they're going to win it still.
All right. Okay. So there you go. Those are our picks in the men's division. Over on the women's side, I'm already taking all of the
so
teams
you're going to
that got
take
buys.
Stanford over Oregon,
Yes.
Dartmouth over Cal,
Yes.
Texas over Michigan, and UCLA over UBC.
Yes. You do the same?
I'm going to take – man. I've been burned too many times by picking UBC. I'm going to pick UCLA.
Okay. So that gives us a Stanford and Dartmouth semifinal. I can't wait. I'm going to take Stanford, but in a very close game.
I'm going to take Stanford. I think they win by like 3 or 4.
Okay. And then the other game we have UCLA and Texas, a rematch of the Pres Day final. And you know what? I think Texas is going to do it this time. I think Texas is going to beat UCLA this time. I think the reason they lost in the finals was because they were coming off of the win over Stanford, and it's so classic. You get that huge upset win, you're so hyped up, and you come out super, super flat in the next game. Happened to them. This time they're not going to be tired. They're going to be fresh. They're going to be looking for revenge. I'm taking Texas.
I'm going to take Texas too, and for similar reasons, but I'm actually going to look backwards. I think UBC is going to be a tough test for UCLA, and I just don't know that Michigan's got the firepower to give it to Texas that way. So I think Texas is going to be in a much better spot coming into that semifinal, and I think that's going to be enough because tiring out a shallow UCLA offense is really helpful. So I'm going to take we're going to have Texas Stanford on both
Texas
sides
Stanford in the final.
A
Okay.
rematch of the only game Stanford lost this year.
And what do you think that means? That means Stanford's going to win this game by 10. This is going to be an epic beatdown. Seriously, though, I think Stanford wins easily.
I think Stanford's going to win that one as well. I don't think you're going to fool them twice.
Texas is going to be like on the line, like cowering in fear before the game. Stanford's going to run their top 10 the whole game.
I feel like I know we said that this probably isn't going to happen, but I feel like there's a chance Cal's going to upset Dartmouth. I'm like starting to talk myself into
Cal
it.
over Dartmouth in the quarters.
I'm starting to talk myself into it. Now, I think that they would get just no way they would beat Stanford. No, there's no chance. But
we'll see.
I feel like maybe.
I'm sure we're going to get an upset. We always do. Great games on tap for tomorrow. Again, we have a women's semifinal, 9:40 a.m. Then we have a men's semifinal. I don't know what time it starts, like 11:20. And then after that, we've got the women's final and the men's final. That'll wrap up our coverage here at the Stanford Invite. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the postgame here. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 9:40 a.m.
Keep your eye out on Twitter because I have a feeling there's going to be some lines going out for all of these quarterfinals, and we'd love to get your opinion on who you think would win. So
making a straight pick too easy. You got to put a line.
Oh yeah. No, we love a good line over here at Ulti World.
All right, signing off for tonight. Thanks so much. He's Keith Rayner. I'm Charlie Eisenhood. See you tomorrow.